On today's edition of Locked On LSU, the real meat and potatoes of LSU's schedule starts this weekend against Auburn. What do we have to expect as LSU fans for the rest of the month of October? We'll get into that, plus so much more on today's edition of Locked On LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In anything that you do, right, when there's change, it requires a commitment. And even though this is a modest winning streak of 3 games, it should be noted that these guys are doing everything possible to make sure that LSU football regains its place, and they're working really hard at it. But there's still a lot of work ahead of us. So I just wanted to make sure that it was duly noted that there's going to be some tough days ahead of us, and we're going to have to grind through it. But they are giving us all that they have.
And I don't know if that was necessarily a warning from Brian Kelly. I don't know if that was necessarily just a mere acknowledgement of just how difficult it's going to be moving forward. Because I think LSU has been given a gift. And within the first 4 weeks of the season, of course, Florida State was not any sort of cupcake to start your season on, but I feel like it was almost the best kick in the butt that this team needed to realize, look, we got big time problems that we need to solve. And we've been able to see them solve those problems over the subsequent weeks. Against Southern, they were able to build a whole lot of confidence. They were able to address some of the problems that they had in the Florida State game, and they were able to do it without fear of, blowing another big time game. It was a game that not nearly as many people watched as they did the Florida State game. So that was almost a gift that, okay, we had a really difficult game and a really, a humbling game against Florida State. Now we can kind of take a step back against an inferior opponent and fix some of those things. And they were able to build even more confidence when they did it against an SEC opponent, when they beat Mississippi State and they did it handedly, and they looked pretty good doing it, at least in the second half. And they were able to continue to heal some of their injuries and build even more confidence against New Mexico, where they were able to play Mississippi State and get that win, understanding and knowing, hey, we got another inferior opponent next week, and, it's going to get easier next week. They don't have that anymore. And Brian Kelly mentions there are going to be tougher days ahead. And he's so right, because the season starts on Saturday. I know that LSU had an SEC opponent. I know that they beat Mississippi State, and getting in the win column in SEC play is so incredibly important. But that game was sandwiched between 2 easier games, to be completely honest with you. They don't have those easier games to look forward to, at least not in the month of October, because they go on the road at Auburn. And while I think that's a game that LSU absolutely will win and must win, well, then you come home and you face number 8 Tennessee, a team that's been absolutely red hot, a team that gave up 450 passing yards to Anthony Richardson and still won the game. So you got that challenge. Then you go on the road at the Swamp. I know Florida, they've kind of had their ups and downs, but that's not an easy environment to play in, especially not when it's your second road game of the season. And then they host Ole Miss, who's another top 25 team. And then, surprise, then on the back end of your bye week, you've got Alabama. And then you go to Fayetteville and you play Arkansas. And of course, you got a nice little buffer in there with UAB. And then you go on the road to College Station and take on Texas A&M, yet another top 25 team. This schedule is so backloaded. And it starts with Auburn. And I had a full breakdown of the Auburn game. You can find that on YouTube. You can find that on your preferred podcast platform. We also spoke with Zach Blackerby, the host of Locked On Auburn. He gave the Auburn perspective. You can find all of those in-depth breakdowns wherever you find Locked On LSU. But with Auburn, that's a game that they should win, but it only gets more difficult from there. So you get a win against Auburn. Now you're 2-0 in the SEC, and you're feeling good. And then you might get smacked in the mouth a few times. And that's Brian Kelly's way of acknowledging, maybe even warning us, hey, this team is on what he called a humble winning streak, I believe were his words. A humble winning streak, which is true. You're going to take the wins where you can get them. You can be excited about LSU and how they've been playing and how they've been improving week over week over week. but it only gets more difficult from here. So if you see a step back, if you see LSU get smacked in the mouth once within the next 7 weeks, I think we need to expect that. And I think that we need to approach this, especially this next month and even the next 2 months, understanding that while this team has made a lot of progress, they still have a whole lot more to do. They have a whole path ahead of them that they have yet to take on. So, I mean, I'm excited to see how LSU approaches these next 2 months. I'm excited to see how LSU plays in the SEC and how they continue to improve week over week, because I have no reason to believe that they won't improve week over week, because that's what they've been doing. But I think we also need to acknowledge that it's going to get really, really difficult moving forward. But the exciting part about that is the season really starts on Saturday. The season really starts against Auburn. And while there might be some tough days ahead, you better guarantee there's going to be some really fun days ahead as well. So we talk a lot about the teams that are on LSU schedule moving forward. So what's going on with them? We're going to do a little bit of the state of the SEC West, a state of the rest of the teams on LSU's schedule, who they're playing this weekend, and my picks. So my best bets of the weekend, kind of what's going on with Ole Miss, what's going on with Alabama, what's going on with Arkansas, what's going on with Texas A&M, the rest of the teams on LSU's schedule. We'll get into that coming up next. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game that you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. Now I'll have all of my picks for the weekend for the SEC West, all of the teams that are on LSU schedule for the rest of the season. But a little hint, give me LSU to cover the spread, and I'll have a full breakdown of the rest of the show. But it's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube as well. And of course, we are part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. So kind of looking around at the SEC West, some of the rest of the teams on LSU's schedule, giving you my best bets of the weekend, and have let's save the best one for last. So first and foremost, you've got Mississippi State, Texas A&M. Texas A&M going on the road to Starkville. Mississippi State is a 3.5-point favorite. And let me preface, before I pick this game specifically, and before I pick the rest of the games, let me preface all of this by saying this was by far the most difficult week of picks yet. This was like, I feel like in the past there were maybe one or two games maybe that I thought, okay, like is it going to be a 14-point win? Is it going to be a 15-point win? But really, for the most part, it felt fairly straightforward and fairly easy. Maybe this week I was pretty stumped. This week I had to really do a deep dive. This week I had to just say, you know what, F it. I'm just going with it. I'm just going for it. And who knows how this game is going to end up. And I think that's the case for a couple of reasons. I think because we've seen two sides of several teams. We've seen a Texas A&M team that loses to App State at home. And then we saw that same Texas A&M team, with the exception of a change of quarterback, go to Jerry's World and beat a top 25 Arkansas team. What's up with that? And I think the second reason is because there are a good bit of teams who have yet to be battle tested. Ole Miss being one of them. And the most difficult team in their schedule so far has been Tulsa. So it's difficult at this point in the season when you're just getting into SEC play, when you have a big enough sample size to feel like you know these teams enough, but also not a massive sample size. That makes it difficult. I would say like weeks 5, 6, 7 are really the toughest to pick, just because you're working with conference play. But like I mentioned, Texas A&M going on the road at Starkville, taking on Mississippi State. Mississippi State is the home favorite, -3.5. I think this game was the hardest game of all of the SEC West games being played for me to pick. And I think it's because I don't really know what Texas A&M is. I don't really know if Texas A&M knows what they are, because Texas A&M is still trying to figure out who they are offensively. They don't have an identity offensively yet. And especially switching up the quarterback from Haynes King to Max Johnson midway through the season so far, that doesn't help you try and find your offensive identity. But I think they're getting there. I think that Max Johnson is settling in nicely. This is his third game as the starter. And Max Johnson, as we know, he has a full season of starting under his belt. This is not anything that's new to him. It's just getting acclimated to the players on this new team and getting acclimated to this offensive scheme. But I think that they're getting there because, of course, Devon A-Chain, he had his best game so far against Arkansas. So maybe he's kind of settling into this role. And A&M's going to need it because they just lost their leading receiver, Anais Smith. So like I said, just Max Johnson getting, into the swing of things, starting to get used to this new offense, and he loses his top weapon in Anais Smith. But I think you can look to Evan Stewart, wide receiver, Donovan Green, tight end. You can look to them to start to step up and be big factors in the passing game. But the offensive line is healthy. As long as the offensive line is healthy and they're able to protect Max Johnson, I think this Texas A&M offense will be good enough. But the X factor in this game, I believe, is the A&M defense against the Mississippi State offense. Texas A&M has a very sneaky good defense. Texas A&M can get to the quarterback now. And DJ Durkin, their defensive coordinator, he came to Texas A&M after a couple years stint at Ole Miss as the co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. So if you're looking at this game alone, if any defensive coordinator knows how to beat Mississippi State, it's going to be Ole Miss's former defensive coordinator, probably second to Mississippi State's defensive coordinator. So DJ Durkin found success stopping this very high-powered Mississippi State offense at Ole Miss. He limited Will Rogers to just a single touchdown pass in the Egg Bowl last year. So I look to see, I think this Texas A&M defense is going to be an X factor as long as the offense doesn't do anything to ruin it. The offense just plays clean football. If Max Johnson is just able to move the ball down the field, which I think we as LSU fans know that's probably what he does best. I don't think Max Johnson can take over the game with the ball in his hands. Bryce Young, he can. He can take over the game. He can march the ball down the field 75 yards and score a touchdown when you need to in the fourth quarter to win in Austin against Texas. He can do that. Max Johnson, from what we've seen from him so far, he cannot. But if you ask Max Johnson, hey, take care of the football, just, push the ball a couple yards downfield, 3 yards here, 3 yards here, 3 yards here, boom, first down. 3 yards, 4 yards, 3 yards, boom, first down. There you go. So I think that's going to be the key here. Can the offense just play safe enough football and let the defense go out there and stop Will Rogers and get pressure on Will Rogers and limit the passing game? I think Texas A&M is going to win this game. So I'm taking Texas A&M to cover plus 3.5, if not outright on the money line. I think that's how LSU was able to beat Mississippi State. Their offense got things moving enough. The offense was balanced enough, and the defense just continued to put pressure on Will Rogers all game long, limited them to fewer than 300 yards. So that's how you beat Mississippi State, is you stop the passing game, because they don't want to rely on the run game. They don't want to defer to the run game. That's not what this Mike Leach offense does. That's not what Mike Leach wants to do. They don't want to run the ball. They want to air the ball out. It is the air raid offense. So I think Texas A&M is able to pick up a road win against Mississippi State. And if they can beat 2 SEC West opponents on the road, one semi on the road, the other a true road game, then I think we can see Texas A&M, turn their season around after that embarrassing loss to App State. So I'm going to take Texas A&M plus 3.5. Second game that I'm looking at, Ole Miss, Kentucky, why this game is at 11 a.m. It's just absolutely brutal. And don't get me started on 11 a.m. starts, because I am not over and never will be over the fact that LSU Tennessee is at 11 a.m., but I digress. Ole Miss is favored by 6.5. I'm also going to take the underdog in this game. I'm going to take Kentucky to cover 6.5, and for 2 reasons. Ole Miss's defense is being touted very, very highly. I hear people saying, oh, Ole Miss, they turned their defense around. That may have been the fatal flaw for Ole Miss last year, that their offense was so high powered and their defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. They finally figured things out defensively. They're ranked in top 5, I believe, in the SEC in sacks, top 5 in total defense. But Ole Miss also hasn't played anybody. That's the really tricky thing about Ole Miss, is they haven't been truly tested so far this season. I mean, you look at their schedule so far, they played Troy, only beat them by 18 points week 1. Week 2 blew out Central Arkansas 59-3. Week 3 beat Georgia Tech 42-0, shut them out. And then last week played Tulsa and actually played Tulsa pretty close. So those are 4 inferior opponents. There's no really true SEC test, nor is there another big time Power 5 test in that group as well. I don't count Georgia Tech as a big time threat as a Power 5 opponent. So that's one reason is I'm not convinced about Ole Miss yet, just because I haven't seen them do it while being tested. The second reason why I'm taking Kentucky to cover, Chris Rodriguez is back. This Kentucky offense has been struggling. I mean, they rank, I believe, 13th in the SEC in total yards. Not great. Not great, especially with a quarterback that's being touted as potentially the top quarterback taken off the board, the top pick in the 2023 NFL draft. I don't buy that, but you can make whatever argument you want. But Chris Rodriguez is back into the mix into this offense. And I think that's important for a few reasons. Because Will Levis has been destroyed. Seriously, 5 sacks against Northern Illinois. I mean, he has been brutalized over the past few weeks. And I think having an easy deference to the run game is going to help Will Rogers, and it's going to ease that pressure in the pocket. So I think that you see Will Levis, I keep wanting to say Will Rogers, Will Levis get sacked less moving forward, having the threat of the run game there. Also, Chris Rodriguez ran for like 1,400 yards last year. You don't lose that kind of offensive production and be able to, bridge that gap seamlessly. You just don't do that. So I think having him back in the mix brings life into this offense and adds another element to this Kentucky offense that it's been needing desperately. No more Wan'Dale Robinson in the mix. Will Levis loses his favorite threat in the passing game from last year. And now in the first 4 games of the season, he didn't have Chris Rodriguez. So I think adding him back into the mix is going to add the extra jolt to this Kentucky offense. So I'm going to take Kentucky to cover. I don't know who's going to win outright, honestly. I really do not know. I lean Kentucky, but I absolutely feel much more confident about Kentucky covering the spread rather than winning outright. And then the final game that I'm picking outside of the LSU Auburn game, we'll get into that coming up next, is Arkansas, Alabama. This is a really interesting one. Alabama's favored minus 17.5. I've also seen that spread shift a little bit to in Arkansas's favor. At Alabama minus 17. I'm going to take Arkansas to cover, but Alabama to win outright. And taking that game on the money line is not worth your money. I think it's like minus 2,000 odds. It's not worth it. So take Arkansas against the spread. I think Arkansas is going to cover because Alabama, in all but one of their road games with Bryce Young as the starting quarterback, have been decided by 3 points or less. Last season, 2021, at Florida, Alabama wins 31-29, a way closer game than it needed to be. And then goes on the road at A&M, loses. At Mississippi State, that was a 40-point win. So that's the one, lone game that wasn't a close road win. At Auburn, we all remember the Iron Bowl last year. Alabama wins at 24-22 in overtime against, honestly, not a great Auburn team. And then this year, of course, at Texas, and they barely squeak out a 1-point win. So Alabama hasn't been playing their best football on the road. We saw them be a little bit more mistake prone against Texas, and I think that is also going to be a factor here. But I think I'm taking Alabama to win because I think we overanalyze and we overvalue the mistakes that Alabama makes because we expect them to be perfect. It's like in those, corny teen movies when the most popular girl in school has a pimple. It's the talk of the town. It's the talk of the school. It's the same thing with Alabama. When they make mistakes or if they play an opponent close, we overvalue that because we expect so much more from Alabama. But let's not forget that this Alabama team has so much talent. This Alabama team has arguably the best quarterback in the SEC in Bryce Young. This Alabama team has a linebacker that's expected to go top 5, if not the top overall pick in the draft. This Alabama team is coached by the greatest coach in college football of all time. And of course, all of this stuff tastes like vinegar coming out of my mouth, but let's be real. BFFR when it comes to Alabama, because they still are one of the top teams in the country. And what Sam Pittman is building in Arkansas, he should be really proud of that. I mean, this team was a bottom feeder team in the West for as long as I can remember. And Arkansas is now turning around, and we're talking about a potential upset against Alabama. I mean, Arkansas fans should be excited about that. Arkansas fans should be proud of that, to see how far they've come in such a short period of time. I'd say the same thing about Tennessee as well. But I think Arkansas is going to keep it close just because of Alabama's history on the road. But I don't feel an upset brewing here in Fayetteville. If you do, I mean, there's good value for Arkansas on the money line. I believe it's almost plus 500 odds. I just think this Alabama team, although they showed that they were undisciplined against Texas, I think overall they are too disciplined. And this is a team that always finds a way to win, even when they shouldn't have won, even when they committed more penalties than they ever have in the Nick Saban era at Texas. They still won. Even when they played Auburn in Florida so close last year, they even played Tennessee close last year, they even played LSU close last year at the half, they still found a way to win. I don't feel an upset coming, maybe in the future with Arkansas, when they continue to build up this team a little bit more. It's just not quite there yet for me with Arkansas, and I'm going to take Alabama to win, but Arkansas to cover. Coming up next, the big one, the most important one of the week. I will make my official LSU Auburn predictions. We'll get into that coming up next. My official pick for LSU Auburn, it opened LSU -8, and then it shifted LSU -8.5. And now in some sports books, it has shifted all the way to 9. Now, Bet Online is my official sports book. It's the official sports book of Locked On LSU. And on Bet Online, it is listed at LSU -9. Whatever sports book you use, I recommend Bet Online. Whether it's LSU -8, whether it's LSU -8.5, or whether it's LSU -9, take LSU to cover the spread. This LSU team should beat the boots off of this Auburn team. This is an Auburn team that looks so uninspired, and for good reason. I mean, their coach is on the hottest seat in the SEC. Their coach was an inch away from getting fired after their game against Missouri. I mean, that Missouri player brings the ball just an inch closer into the end zone, and he doesn't fumble in the end zone. And Brian Harson's probably fired after that game because Auburn would lose that game. They played Missouri, who in almost every statistical category ranks dead last, if not 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, whatever it is, in the SEC. This is a pretty god-awful Missouri team. And Auburn almost lost to them. Auburn's coach is inevitably going to be fired. If I had to bet, or if I was Vegas and I was making the odds of, is Brian Harsin the Auburn head coach on Monday, I would make it no, minus like 10,000. This Auburn team, it started with the coaching staff and it just kind of trickled down. There are so many issues with this Auburn team off the field, and it's kind of transpired on the field. Now, I gave Auburn credit for their defense because their defensive line, I mean, they've been getting to the quarterback just fine. But offensively, they have yet to throw a touchdown pass to a wide receiver. Just think about that. Through 4 weeks, not a single wide receiver has caught a touchdown pass. That's bad. There are 2 quarterbacks who have seen a majority of play in TJ Finley and Robbie Ashford. They combined for 2 touchdown passes and 6 interceptions. They're not taking care of the football. They're not doing what works. They're not committing to the run with Jarquez Hunter and Tank Bigsby. Undoubtedly, probably, at least from what I've seen, because we haven't seen anything from the wide receivers, their most talented players on offense. I don't think they like their coach very much. This is an uninspired Auburn team. This is an Auburn team that I don't expect a lot from this season, to be completely honest with you. This is an LSU team that, although I don't expect LSU to go to the national championship, I don't expect LSU to be in Atlanta in the SEC championship at the end of the season. This is an LSU team that I at least want to see promise. I at least want to see improvement. That's all I'll ask from this team this year. Can you get better every week? Can you fix your mistakes? I don't think it's that much to ask. And if LSU is going to do that and is going to continue to improve and fix their mistakes and get better week over week, they should beat the boots off of Auburn. So that's why I'm taking LSU -9. This LSU team has the defense to stop, whatever Auburn offense is there. All the offense has got to do is just take care of the football, move the ball downfield, take advantage of your playmakers, spread the ball around, which Jaden Daniels has found a good bit of success doing, not just targeting one guy, but targeting 5, 6, 7 different pass catchers throughout the game. Commit to the run the football, and gain that confidence on the road at Jordan-Hare, a raucous environment at night. Get that momentum going, get that confidence underneath you. Get that just excited feeling of being 2-0 in the SEC with a first-year head coach, and bring that back against Tennessee at home next week. I think this LSU team is better than this Auburn team. This LSU team has proven to fix their issues week over week. Auburn hasn't. Auburn still has a bunch of issues, and Auburn needs to fire their coach, which I think if/when, because I'm calling it here, when LSU beats Auburn on Saturday, Brian Harsin will be fired pretty soon after. Now, that's not to say that I could eat my words on Monday, that LSU could commit a bunch of fatal penalties and fatal flaws and turn the ball over, which they haven't been doing very much of, so I have no reason to believe that they will. Maybe the road environment gets to them. Maybe they do uncharacteristic bad things. I don't know. I mean, I can eat my words on Monday, but this LSU team should beat this Auburn team. So that's what I'm expecting. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. On Monday, I'll have a full Auburn breakdown, 3 things I liked from the game, 3 things that I didn't like from the game. We'll get into that on Monday, but you can also get more on the SEC by making Locked on SEC your second listen. Every day, host Chris Gordy, the local experts of Locked on, take you across the SEC in 30 minutes. Make Locked on SEC your second listen.